Welcome back to my channel. Today I want to talk about another aspect of motherhood that I have not really talked about, and that would be breastfeeding. So first I want to say I don't like breastfeeding. I actually ended up exclusively pumping with both of my kids. So in the beginning I had every intention of breastfeeding. I had this idea in my head about how beautiful it would be and how I would bond with my babies and breastfeed them all the time, and I had no idea how difficult it was, two, how painful it was, and then three, just how I just don't like it. It's not for me. It ended up not working out to breastfeed, and now looking back, I can just definitely say I don't like it. And that was the conclusion I came to. So for my first, I had gotten a pump through insurance, so I did of course have the intention to pump when I went back to work. And I knew that I would need to start pumping before I went back to work because I only had 6 weeks off for maternity leave. And yeah, so I was planning on pumping before the 6 weeks was over so that I would be used to it, I would know what I was doing, and wouldn't go back to work and then all of a sudden my son doesn't know how to take a bottle. But I did not expect to have such a hard time breastfeeding. So when we first did skin to skin after he was born, we started breastfeeding. It was okay, but he kept coming off. He kept unlatching, and I had the lactation consultants in the hospital try to help me and show me what to do, and I took all of their advice. But one thing I didn't know about was the contractions that you would get of your uterus after you've had the baby and when you're breastfeeding. So it actually makes your uterus contract so that it can shrink. So that pain was crazy. That was so painful. So on top of that pain, I also had a lot of pain on my nipples, and I didn't know why. So I think already on the second day, my nipples were bloody. They were so raw. They hurt so bad. And I mean, I was trying the lanolin and the gel soothers and whatever I could, whatever the hospital had that they were giving me, and my nipples hurt so bad. And it got to the point, once we got home, I think like the third or fourth day, I would cry every single time that I breastfed. So anytime, and I was exclusively breastfeeding, and I would cry every single time I fed my baby because it hurt so bad, and I didn't know why. And I, of course, had heard other stories about how breastfeeding was painful and how it's not easy, so I just thought, oh, this is how it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be painful. My nipples are supposed to hurt. My nipples are supposed to be bleeding and raw. So I just kind of accepted that this was horrible, but this was how it was supposed to be. So I was just going to keep doing that until finally some family members kind of encouraged me to take a break or to start pumping or to do something. Because it was really causing me so much anguish. So I think when he was like 4 days old, 5 days old, I went ahead and started pumping, and then my nipples could actually heal. And then what I figured out is that my son actually had a tongue tie that nobody had noticed. None of the lactation consultants had noticed. The pediatrician didn't, nobody noticed, nobody was looking for it, and nobody noticed, and I didn't know that breastfeeding wasn't supposed to be like that, so I didn't know to ask. I didn't know to ask them to check. of course, when he was first born, I noticed that there was something with his tongue, but I just thought that's how it was. I didn't know what a tongue tie was. So, in case anybody doesn't know, it's where the, I guess, skin that's connecting the tongue to the bottom of your mouth is really small and really tight. So, because of the tongue tie, he couldn't get his tongue under my nipple to breastfeed effectively. So because of that, his latch was very shallow, and then after he would breastfeed, my nipple looked like a tube of lipstick, and that is not supposed to happen, because they're supposed to get a really deep latch, and it's not supposed to be painful like that. I mean, it might not be necessarily comfortable, but it's not supposed to be that painful. So then when we had his pediatrician appointment, we let her know, like, hey, can you check this out? I think he has a tongue tie, because I just started Googling, like, what is going on? Why is this hurting? Why does my, why is this happening? And I actually stumbled upon a YouTube video, and the woman who was talking about it said that her nipple looked like a tube of lipstick, and that's when it clicked. Oh my gosh, I think this is what's going on. And then I started Googling a tongue tie, and then it looked exactly like it. So we went to the pediatrician at his next appointment. We told her, she looked, and she said, yeah, that's definitely a tongue tie. So she doesn't revise it, but that's something an ENT revises. So we made an appointment in the same practice for the pediatric ENT in that office to revise it a couple of days later. So we went, and it was super easy. He didn't even cry. They numb it, and then they just snip it, and that was it. There were, like I said, no issues. He didn't even cry. He almost slept through the whole thing, really, since he was just a few days old. And I thought that getting it revised would automatically just solve all my problems. So I tried to keep breastfeeding while also pumping, and it was a struggle for both of us. He was not happy because he wasn't getting enough milk. I wasn't happy because I was still in a lot of pain. His latch was still really shallow, and for me, I decided to go ahead and just exclusively pump, because it was really important to me to keep giving breast milk only, especially during that whole postpartum time. The thought of giving formula, it was a failure. If I gave formula, I was failing, because, of course, I thought I should be able to breastfeed. It should be easy. I shouldn't need to give formula, especially because I had really good milk. I had a lot of milk. There was no shortage of milk, and my milk was really thick. So I knew it was really fatty and nutritious, which was exactly what he needed. So to me, if I gave formula, that meant that I was failing. And during that time, like I've spoken previously about my postpartum anxiety and just how much pressure I put on myself to be perfect. So this was another thing that I thought I had to be perfect at. So once I figured out that exclusively pumping was even a thing, which I had never heard of that before. So once I figured that out, I felt really good about it, and so that's what I started doing. I think I maybe tried to get him to latch a couple more times, and it was just, we were both in tears, and it really was not worth it. And to me, the most important part was that he was getting breast milk, so that's why I just decided to exclusively pump. So I exclusively pumped for exactly 1 year. So on his birthday is the last day that I pumped. And back then, I did not know about wearable pumps. I certainly could not afford a wearable pump during that time period. So I just had the one that I got through insurance. I definitely think I was using the wrong size flange, because I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know what I was doing. Luckily, I did have a really, really good supply, so I was able to make enough milk for the whole year. But I was anxious every single day about whether I was going to have enough milk. So I was anxious every single day about it for an entire year. And like I said, I never ran out, but I was thinking about it all the time. Am I making enough? Am I gonna have enough? Am I gonna run out? What am I gonna do? And just all these, I guess those were intrusive thoughts that I didn't know. And it was also something that I was obsessing over and I didn't realize. And the people around me that were supporting me were encouraging me that I can do whatever I want. If I don't want to pump anymore, I don't have to. I can give formula. And I didn't want to listen to it. And I didn't want to change my mind. And I didn't want to change my new plan because I had already failed at my first plan and I didn't want to fail at my second plan. So that's why I kept going. I would pump, I think for the most part, I pumped 5 times a day. He started sleeping through the night after, I would say solidly around 5 months. So I wouldn't pump during the night, but I would pump 5 times during the day. And I had the double Lancino pump. So it was fine. It worked fine. I definitely know a lot now. I definitely know a lot more now about pumping and pumps, but for the first time it was fine. I got the job done. I also used the Kind freezer bags, and I just stored all my milk in there. I would also use a hand pump if I was on the go, or if I was driving, I'd use the double Lancino pump because it could also work on batteries. So I would do that. And my life just kind of revolved around pumping a lot of the time, and I was also very, very exhausted during that time period. And now looking back, I'm not sure if maybe that's when my thyroid problems started developing and I just didn't know. So that's something I've kind of thought about because of how exhausted I was, or I don't know if maybe I just wasn't getting enough calories to sustain how much I was pumping. I'm not really sure. But that was what I did that whole year. So then when I had my second baby, I again had plans to breastfeed. I felt like I knew better. I would be on the lookout for a tongue tie. If she had a tongue tie, then I, would get it fixed. And so I did have a better time in the beginning with breastfeeding. So in the hospital, she actually would feed for about 2 hours straight when she was first born. And I would just go back and forth between each breast because she would empty one, I'd go to the other side, she'd empty that one, I'd go back, she'd empty that one again, I'd go back. And it was to the point where in the middle of the night, I think the second night, the nurse actually took the baby to take care of her for a couple of hours so I could actually get sleep, because if she was near me, all she wanted to do was feed. And I could not keep going for those 2-hour sessions back to back. So that nurse really, really helped me get some sleep, and then I was able to feed her again. And I think the baby ended up sleeping 4 hours because she wasn't around me. So she actually slept instead of just wanting milk. But because she fed so much, my milk came in very quickly, which doesn't always happen when you have a C-section. Sometimes your milk might not come in as fast, especially if you don't get, to hold your baby right away or feed your baby, which mine was even delayed. If you watch my last video, I couldn't hold her for a couple of hours because I was shaking so bad. But once I did get her, then, I mean, she was off to the races. She knew she wanted milk, and she was getting a lot. So it seemed like the latch was fine. I guess it was, and it wasn't painful like before. I definitely am still not crazy about those contractions while you're breastfeeding. But it was not painful like before. It was just getting really tender because of how long that she was breastfeeding. But I definitely thought that this was like my second chance to get that experience of exclusively breastfeeding, at least until I went back to work. And again, it didn't happen. It didn't happen. I realized that I don't like breastfeeding. I don't like my baby on me and feeding all the time, all day and night. Because when I was exclusively pumping, anybody can feed a bottle. And to me, that was a really, really big plus. So the second time around, we took shifts because I went ahead and went back to exclusively pumping, especially because I was in so much pain from my C-section. I remember I was trying to breastfeed, and again, it was going okay, but I didn't really know a lot of like the positions and where to put the baby when you're laying down, and there's the football hold and the crisscross hold, and it was just all very complicated to me. So I was trying to Google the different positions, and I really couldn't move around well, and like I couldn't have her on my stomach because it was so painful and it was near the incision. So I was really having a lot of trouble with that, and I really couldn't even hold her. I definitely couldn't stand and hold her. If I was able to stand and change her diaper, I couldn't get her off the changing table because I couldn't hold her yet because I was so weak from the C-section. So breastfeeding turned out to be really difficult in those aspects for me. And so after a few days of being home, I just decided that breastfeeding was just not going to be for me, that I knew that I could exclusively pump for a year, and I knew that I was not in a space to handle healing from the C-section and trying to figure out breastfeeding, since I really didn't have much experience with it. So it was kind of like starting brand new. And I didn't have the mental capacity at the time to try to juggle both. So I decided to just start exclusively pumping. I already had a pump again. I was prepared to go back to work in 6 weeks, so I already had a pump. And I just wanted to start doing that. And for me, it is a lot easier that my husband can feed the baby during the day, during the night. It actually allowed me to nap a lot during the day, which is what helped me recover faster. And then at night, we would take shifts. So he would get the shift all the way until like 1 a.m. And then after 1 a.m., I would take over until the morning, like 6 or 7. So we were getting a little bit of sleep by doing the shifts like that. So he would just stay up later and then sleep in, and then I would go to sleep earlier and then kind of be up in maybe once or twice in the middle of the night and then up a little earlier. So that really worked for us. And then if any family was over or anything, or we went to any family's houses that they could again feed the baby, which we didn't really go anywhere then because being in the car was really difficult for me. But at this time, during this exclusive pumping journey, I decided that if I was going to make it work with breastfeeding for a year, going back to work, and having another kid on top of that already, that I needed a wearable pump. And it was really expensive. They're about $500 for the Willow or the Elvie, so they're about the same price. But to me, at that time, it was really worth it if I could be doing other things, if I could be doing chores, if I could be taking care of either kid while I'm pumping, and that was really important to me. And I also thought about the cost over the entire year, and that was really that's what sold it to me, was how much use I would get out of it in a whole year. So I went ahead, I took the plunge. I read one article about comparing the Willow and the Elvie, and I decided to get the Elvie, and it was the best decision I could have ever done for my pumping journey. So I will say I did not know very much about pumping other than my own experience exclusively pumping for a year. So I had no idea about sizing, about why size matters. That was the biggest thing. So I kept trying the different size breast shields on the pump, and I would just eyeball it, and I somehow did not know the difference between measuring your nipple and measuring your areola. So I was measuring all of it, thinking I was the biggest size, and really not knowing, until I finally watched another YouTube video. I got on some Facebook groups, I figured out what was going on, and I actually printed out a ruler, which I'll link just in case, anybody needs it. I ended up printing that ruler and sizing myself, figured out I needed 2 sizes down from what I was using, and all of my problems went away. There was no more clogging. I was actually getting all of the milk out, and it completely changed everything. I had no idea how much sizing mattered. So I don't even know how much more milk I could have gotten the first time around if I was actually using the right size, because I was using, it was just a small and a large, and I was using a large. And then on this pump, I was using the smallest shield because I'm a small size. And yeah, so I had no idea about that. So that was the biggest thing that helped me on that journey, was sizing myself and actually using the right shield, or on other pumps they're called the flange. And also just hydrating, making sure I was hydrated. A lot of people talk about the body armor drinks, and I started drinking those. They have electrolytes in them as well, and really it's just about getting hydrated. There's nothing magical in that drink, but because it has the electrolytes, it's extra hydrating. So for me, it was like getting more bang for your buck. So instead of, drinking a glass of water, I could drink a body armor and I would just feel more hydrated. So that did help my milk a little bit. But other than that, getting the right size was the biggest thing that I could have done. So once I got the right size, like I said, I wasn't getting clogs anymore. I was actually getting all of the milk out, so I didn't have to hand express afterwards. And then I really was very happy that I had gotten the Elvie, and I felt like it was really efficient. It was definitely worth the cost. I did so much while I was pumping, and I don't think I would have been able to do another year without a wearable pump. I would do dishes, I would do laundry, I would hold the baby, I would change her diaper, I could be with my toddler, I could play with him. So it helped so much. It also made pumping at work a lot easier, because I could actually put it in and then go work at my desk while I was pumping. So because of that, I would actually get all of my pumps in. So I would pump in the morning on my way to work, so I wouldn't have to get up extra early. I could just easily pump in the car. I would just put it in, get in the car, drive to work, and take it out when I got there. And then I would also pump during my lunch, and then I would pump between my lunch and the end of the day. And that's usually the pump that I would miss the most, the first year, because it's hard to get away from work. I've already had my lunch break. I've already taken a break, and it was just hard to get away from the work and what I was in the middle of. But I could get away for 5 minutes to set up my pump and put it in, and then go back to my desk and keep working. So that was really, really beneficial. And then I ended up just getting really tired of pumping. So that time I ended up quitting at about 11 months or so. I didn't make it a whole year. I almost did. I think I made it like 11 months and a week or so. And then I did also start giving some formula around 10 months because I was just getting really, really tired of pumping, and I wasn't hitting all my pumps because I was very tired from pumping. I was just kind of over it. But again, I was forcing myself to keep pumping because that's what I was supposed to do. That's what a mother who's not failing is doing, is continue pumping even when you don't want to, even when you're tired of it. So that's what I thought I was supposed to do. I also got a couple rounds of mastitis because I missed some pumps, so I got mastitis twice. So the first time I was able to get it out, it was just like a really bad clog, and it was starting to be mastitis, but I didn't get a fever, and then I finally got that clear after like 2 really, really painful days. And then exactly a week later, I got it again. And I got a fever, I got the chills. It was so painful. I tried everything to get the clog out, and I finally got it out, but it was so painful, and it just really reinforced how done I was. But I still didn't stop. I still kept going. I still wanted to exclusively pump, even though my supply was going down. I think a lot because of the mastitis, so I wasn't getting as much in a day, so my supply went down. So because my supply went down, I wasn't really making enough to only exclusively pump. I wasn't making enough, so I decided that I was now going to power pump multiple times a day. And I actually did that for a couple of days. So I figured out that I could increase my supply and I could make enough milk if I pumped 8 times a day, and 2 of those were power pumping. And I was really determined. I did that for about 2 days, and I actually did go buy a container of formula as a just in case, and that was a really big deal for me. I felt really bad about it. I cried about it. I felt like a failure for even buying formula, but of course I didn't want my baby to starve if I did run out of breast milk. So I decided, and okay, she wasn't going to starve because she was also eating food at that point, because that was around 10 months. So she was also eating food, but she was primarily still drinking breast milk because she was under a year old. So I went ahead, I went and got a carton of formula from Target. Like I said, I felt so ashamed about it, which now thinking back, it seems so silly, but that's how I was feeling. I felt really, really ashamed about it, that I was buying this formula, which I don't know why any mother or parent should feel ashamed about feeding their child. They shouldn't. They shouldn't. No matter what. Breast milk, formula, whatever. It doesn't matter. You should not feel ashamed for feeding your child. But I did. And I really didn't want to give her the formula, which is why I decided I could pump 8 times a day, 2 of them power pumping, and that's how I was going to get my supply back up. And it was working. It was working. My supply was going up. I was making enough. It was not sustainable to pump 8 times a day. It was not sustainable at all. My anxiety, it was not helping my anxiety. It was making it worse. And it was also making me hate it even more. Just making me really, really not like it, not enjoy my time, and not enjoy the little bit of time I had in between pumping. And after, I think it was 2 days of that, I just said, okay, I can't do this, and I need to give my baby some formula. So I started with mixing formula and breast milk for her bedtime bottle, and she took it really well, and there were no issues, and she liked it. She would drink it all, and so I was okay that I was giving every bedtime bottle was partially formula, partially breast milk. So that was like a compromise for me that I could live with, that I could do that. So I would do that. I would just plan for that for every bedtime bottle. So then that actually allowed me to make a little bit extra breast milk so that I wasn't so like, down to the ounce, or, oh, I have to pump right before this bottle because I'm not going to have enough. So the formula really helped me just to kind of take that anxiety away that she was going to eat. She wasn't going to go hungry. She was going to get all the milk that she needed. And then once I saw that it was okay, nothing bad happened, everything was fine, then I let myself mix maybe a second bottle during the day with part formula, part breast milk. And then it was about a week before she turned 1, and so I'm a rule follower. I'm really a stickler for rules and the exact dates. So it was about a week before she turned 1, and I didn't wanna pump anymore. And so I messaged the pediatrician and I asked if I could start mixing the formula with whole milk, if that would be okay, even though she wasn't 1 yet. It was about a week, maybe 2 early. I don't really remember. And she said it was fine. She said it was totally fine. So I ended up just pumping less and less, and then I went ahead and stopped pumping, and I just gave her the formula mixed with whole milk, and then ended up just transitioning once we ran out of that container of formula, which I think we only ended up using a total of 2 containers of formula. Once we ran out of the second one, then we would just give her whole milk, still warmed up in a bottle. She never noticed at all. She didn't notice the difference between breast milk to formula to whole milk. She didn't care any step of the way. So I just wonder, if maybe I had just listened to her instead of listening to how harsh I was on myself about the whole journey, that maybe I would have enjoyed that aspect a little better. But overall, I can say I don't like breastfeeding. It was not for me. I made pumping work. I don't know if I would say it's for me, but it's definitely for me over breastfeeding. And that I wish I could go back and tell myself that everything was okay, and that I didn't need to worry so much about pumping, and I didn't need to worry so much about exclusively breastfeeding or pumping or whatever it was, and that fed really is best, and it's not worth the anxiety. It's really not. And that's my biggest takeaway. It's not worth the anxiety, it's not worth the shame, it's not worth feeling bad about yourself or thinking you're a failure, because you're not. You're just not. You're not a failure, and it doesn't matter how you fed your baby. As long as your baby's happy and healthy. That's it. That's all that matters. So that was my experience with breastfeeding and exclusively pumping for 2 babies. And I hope you enjoyed what I had to say. If you would like this video, subscribe, comment, go check out my Instagram at Admire Yourself Today. And I would love to hear about your experiences. Did you experience the same thing? Did you feel the same way about breastfeeding as I did? Or, anything you have related to this topic, I would love to hear from you. So thank you for joining me, and I'll see you next time. Bye!